Welcome to Righted Wrongs, the podcast from Hudgell Solicitors that brings you expert insight into some of today's most pressing and relevant legal matters. Joining us for this episode is Matthew Gascoyne, Senior Associate Solicitor and a Specialist in Medical Negligence. Matthew, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Today I'd like to discuss sepsis and more specifically the increasing impact of Martha's role, which is featured in the news quite a lot lately. It's been rolled out nationally after a successful trial period. Starting from a really basic level, Matthew, what actually is Martha's role and why was it introduced?
Yes, so Martha's Rule is a patient safety initiative designed to encourage the early diagnosis and treatment of sepsis. It's named after Martha Mills, who sadly was a 13-year-old girl who passed away in 2021. She'd been admitted to hospital after a bicycle accident, and her parents' concerns about subtle deteriorations in her condition were not acted on by her doctors until it was too late and she passed away. The family have done some incredibly effective campaigning ever since, and Martha's Rule is the outcome of that campaign. At its most basic level, it's an entitlement to a second opinion into concerns that the patient or their family or carers may have about symptoms or deterioration that are not being assessed by their current doctors.
Why is sepsis missed so often?
I mean, you're absolutely right. It is a leading cause of death, and very sadly, with proper treatment in a reasonable time frame, often the harm and death can be avoided. The concern with sepsis is that symptoms are non-specific. So symptoms that are as a result of sepsis can quite often be attributed to other conditions. And we need to remember that the patients that we're talking about are already in hospital for serious conditions, illnesses, other diseases. So what tends to happen in these cases is that symptoms or deterioration, which can be quite subtle, are not properly identified, or if they are identified, they're being attributed to the underlying condition rather than raising concern for sepsis.
Martha's Rule then, in practical terms, how does it work? Who can bring it into play? And what happens when it's triggered?
So it's the right of the patient, their family or carers, or their treating clinicians to raise concerns about deterioration and symptoms. In its most basic sense, it's making sure that the patient's voice is heard. So there is a requirement that on a daily basis, the treating doctors ask the patient or their family how they're feeling, any concerns that they have, and that they then act upon those concerns. Its normal focus, however, is on the right to a second opinion. So different hospitals have different ways of triggering it, but most often there is a dedicated telephone number which should be published around the hospital.
Like a hotline?
Exactly. And if you call that, a specialist from a different team should come, assess the patient, discuss with their treating clinicians, identify any investigations or treatment that is needed, and in the most severe cases, arrange for immediate escalation to somewhere like an intensive care unit. I mentioned that it's normally a hotline, but there are different ways, and at its most basic, it's asking your doctor, can I have a second opinion about this that's concerning me?
This approach, Martha's Rule, it was trialled successfully in, I believe, more than 100 hospitals for over a year. What kind of data did you see coming out of that study?
So the requests for review became a regular feature of in-hospital care during the trial period. Over 5,000 calls were made for consideration of deterioration or review in a 9-month period up to June 2025. Of those, roughly a half to 2/3 ended up having a second opinion, with the remainder being dealt with by the treating clinician in first hand. Several hundred led to minor changes in treatment or other investigations to correct non-life-threatening situations or errors, but importantly, over 240 led to escalation in care or administering treatment that is considered probably saved that person's life. So had a real major impact in improving patient safety.
Are people finding that Martha's Rule is influencing levels of communication and trust between doctors, patients and families?
Absolutely. So it's helping an open communication and dialogue between patients, their families, their doctors and the wider caring staff at the hospitals. It's making sure that the patient's voice is heard, and it's raising the confidence that the patient and their families have in their treating clinicians, and in making sure that the care and treatment that they're receiving is correct and is addressing all of the problems that they're having. In addition, it's allowing minor errors to be picked up before they become major errors. So things such as increasing the dosage of a medication or administering pain relief where that has been overlooked by the treating clinicians. And most importantly, it's boosting the trust between the treating team, the patient, and their wider family.
On the flip side of that, I mean, I would imagine there are potential barriers to Martha's Rule being invoked because for families and junior doctors, I mean, are people finding that's the case or not?
A major concern has been the perception that if you're questioning your doctor's judgment, they're going to become offended, your care may suffer. Equally, the NHS itself is quite a hierarchical structure, and traditionally there's been a reluctance for junior doctors to question the decision-making of their senior colleagues. What the feedback from the trials has suggested, however, is that that's not been the case. Where Martha's Rule has been invoked, it's had the impact of opening a dialogue, improving communication, fostering a better team dynamic, and making decisions on a shared basis with information from various sources that improve the patient care and safety. There's been no reports of care suffering in a situation where a patient has raised Martha's Rule. And the important thing to remember is that everyone in the NHS is working to improve and promote patient health and safety wherever possible. So should accept the implementation of Martha's Rule as an important tool in that goal.
But there is still a great deal of work to be done, isn't there?
There is. So following the successful trial, NHS England have agreed to roll out Martha's Rule across all acute hospital trusts. That rollout is in process. It's going to be completed by 2026, 2027. There are obviously practical concerns, making sure, for example, that hospitals have the structure and the capacity in place to allow for these second opinion reviews in a reasonable time frame when they'll make a difference. And also communicating the rule and the entitlement to patients, their families, making sure that hotlines are set up and well published, that information is available around the hospital, and that the structural changes are in place to allow hospitals to deal with the reviews as and when they're required. A major concern is making sure that vulnerable communities are able to access this in the same way as everyone else. In particular, for example, people for whom English isn't a first language. Not only do they have to know of their rights, so we have to be able to communicate it to them in a way that they can understand, but they have to be confident in raising it, and quite often they don't have the English skills to communicate their concerns in a way that will get them the attention that they need. Essentially, it's about making sure that the patients are empowered to be involved in their own care and are listened to by their doctors.
In more general terms, are there sort of broader lessons that the UK healthcare system could learn from the implementation of Martha's Rule and maybe extrapolate into other areas?
Absolutely. So it's about fostering this sense of patient safety and making sure that they are an equal partner in their own healthcare. It's making sure that their concerns are listened to rather than being dismissed, and that investigations, communication and treatment is available to them wherever it's required. It's about understanding that the involvement of a second opinion is not a comment on the treating doctor's capabilities or decision making, but it's a useful safety net to make sure that any errors that do creep into the system are caught before they cause serious harm.
Well, what a truly incredible legacy for that young lady to leave. Matthew, thanks very much.
Thank you.
That was very informative. If you'd like to learn more about Martha's Rule or sepsis negligence, visit our website. This has been Righting Wrongs. Thank you for watching.